welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. It is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, high atop the flat Earth, flying around on turtles.
UFOs.
That's right. We got some good stuff coming up. We have a very fascinating report from 2017. It's a high-profile UFO incident that we'll get to later. Or are we going to get to that right now? We're just going to go ahead and do that right now? Just get it done?
Yeah.
Get it out of the way?
Yeah, because it could be a long deal.
Yeah.
I just did all this prep work for it.
That's right. We
better knock it out.
We have sound bites.
We actually have sound bites. Show prep.
We did show prep. So, this story it happened in 2017, on October 25th in 2017, and I had it pulled up and I lost it. But basically, they call it an intruder. An unknown aircraft comes like screaming down California, going southbound, like really moving, and then it suddenly does like an about face, like a 180, and then it's picked up later, a little bit later, on radar, briefly, over Oregon, and the FAA and the air traffic control in Seattle, and then I think it's Portland Center 36 they're all talking to each other, and they're talking to the pilots. And so basically, like, it shows up on radar and then it disappears from radar, and now it's like it was initially going southbound really fast, then it turns around and goes northbound and sort of paces the other aircraft that are also northbound to Portland and to Seattle. And even though they can't see it on radar anymore, the pilots that are up there are able to see it visually. Now they're not seeing it on their, like, the airplanes themselves have like internal radar systems called it's collision control, like basically to avoid colliding with something else. So they're not seeing it on their radar. The air traffic control, which has, massive radar, they're not seeing it either on their primaries, but the pilots are seeing it visually. So we've got these sound bites, basically, that is a kind of a montage of all of the conversations that are happening at the time. So the first one is basically it's Seattle Center talking to, I think, to the somebody from the FAA, and they're telling them, like, look, we had this thing coming in, look at it on your radar, and they're seeing it. And then we go to some pilots talking back and forth. And anyway, you can listen to it.
It's about 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's about 5 minutes long, and it's pretty interesting. So
we'll play it and discuss it after words.
Yeah.
Oka 31.
Aircraft number 150 Lima, Level 43, the wrong way.
That's pretty great. Do you know that target south of the boundary there, that 0027 code, moving very fast at 37,000?
Oh, look at that thing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Huh. And you don't have anything on him, huh?
I got nothing.
Well, look.
WestJet 1698.
No, the WestJet 1698 is he is at 370, and that dude is, 150 miles to the north of him. I'll flash to that data block. There you go. There's where WestJet is.
Okay, I see him up there. That's crazy. That's fascinating.
Yeah, all right, I'll report that.
Thanks, Senator.
Okay.
Bureaucrats. I'll report that.
This is Sector 36. We had a target come through our airspace going really fast. At level 370 earlier, an intruder, mostly intruder, going southbound. And then now, apparently, the Southwest 4712 sees an aircraft off his right side about at 1 o'clock and 10 miles going northbound at 370. We don't have anything on radar anymore or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, it's on my primary zone.
And we don't see any primaries or anything either.
But I will... Okay. Yeah.
Just to let you know, and our supervisors are calling all the appropriate people. So.
And does he have any idea what kind of aircraft it is?
No, we've asked him, and he doesn't. He said it's about his 1 to 2 o'clock and 10 miles off his right side now. So.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe.
Center, good evening, Southwest 4712, flight level 380, and we're watching that unknown aircraft at 1 o'clock.
Southwest 4712, Seattle Center, Roger, and can you estimate the altitude, please?
Business committee says 370.
Thanks, sir.
Welcome to the desk.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hey, we just had a weird thing that happened, kind of,
37,000 feet?
yeah.
Coming to you? It's a real aircraft, but nobody knows who it is.
Really?
It's been reported by the pilot right behind them.
Really?
Yeah. And the target's been jumping around, but we have no code, no nothing.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just going to call
Say
you
really
and tell you
again.
that there could be a plane that's...
At 37?
Yeah.
So another aircraft actually visually saw it.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get an even stranger.
United 612, Seattle.
Good.
United 612, take a look out the right side. You're at 3 o'clock and maybe 5 to 10 miles for an airplane that's maybe northbound 370-ish.
Yeah, we got him. It's a white airplane. Yeah, about 10 miles away.
Yes, sir. Is he about a BMU overtaking?
Yeah, he's a beam us. It looks like he's slowly going a little bit away from us. 350.
Beam? Yeah, right next
United
to you.
612, thank you. Keep a visual if you can. Let me know.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's United 612. It's just a white speck out there. I mean, we can see it, but there's no identification on it, just that it's there.
United 612, can you estimate any altitude?
Yeah, it looks like he's probably about 4,000 or 5,000 feet above us.
Watch this.
Hi.
Yeah.
So are you listening to any of this? Or the Sector 14, they're actually talking about Southwest 4712. He actually has visual on an aircraft that he estimates about 37,000, and we don't even see him on a primary.
Anyways, yeah, whatever you did see, if it looked like it was a target, we had it too for a second, and then it's gone again. Okay, air defense is looking for it now.
So they're unable to determine exactly what type of an aircraft it is.
Okay. So that's the first bit.
Yeah, so that last part was a kind of a montage of a bunch of different phone calls mixed in with them talking to the pilot, with the ATC talking to the pilots.
Yeah, so we got this audio from the website. What is the name of the website?
The website is The Drive, but it's the War Zone on The Drive. So.
Okay, and they posted all this stuff from a FOIA request,
Yeah.
whatever, and there's really long videos. There's a whole series of them. I don't know,
Yeah,
it's like 4 videos, and they're 30 minutes plus, some of them.
Yeah, the first one is basically, it's really cool if you have time to watch it, because if you can blow it up, it's got the radar data. So and all the air traffic control conversations with the airplane is synced to the data itself. So you can watch all these planes and their blips and everything, and they're kind of moving real slowly on their
Going
routes.
northbound.
Yeah,
on this
northbound.
route.
And you can see, which ones. So there's like Southwest 4712, and there's what was the other one? Something
610.
Yeah, whatever. But you can see them on there. You can pick them out, and then every once in a while, this like little blip will just appear randomly, and it says unknown.
Yeah.
Right. And then it just disappears again, and that happens like 2 or 3 times. You see it like right, and you can see how these different pilots are saying, "Yeah, it's at my 3 o'clock, it's at the 4 o'clock, 1 o'clock," and you can see it in that spot when it appears.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
So we pulled a bunch of audio from that, just and I cut out all the silent space,
there's
and we
long
just kind of put
waits.
them together. And then there's other videos where during and after the fact, all these phone calls that are happening on the ground.
Yeah.
Where one airport or whatever is calling another, and then they're confirming that this is happening, or have you seen this? And then what are the two?
Yeah, so there's
DEF or
there's DEN, which is
DEN?
the defense or it's the something event network, the
Yeah.
defense and event network. So that basically is like a system for anything weird that happens in airspace. They contact them, and these guys can liaison with the military in case they need to scramble, which does end up happening in this. They send 2 F-15s to find it, and they're not able to locate it.
Yeah, so there's phone calls back and forth between them and the Air Force. Or whatever.
Yeah, the other one was WADS, which is the Western Air Defense System.
Right. So they're trying to get all the information they can from the guys on the ground as to what's going on in the air. Because
nobody
pilots are seeing.
Nobody
they
can
don't
see
have
it on
radar.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of that, and then basically this story that is being reported back and forth between the pilots and the guys on the ground are in the phone calls. They're calling other people and telling them this is all what happened. This is what they're estimating. This is where they're seeing it. And they're telling this to the military guys, and the military guys, okay, we're going to get our assets in the air.
Yeah.
And eventually they do that. And
yeah, they scramble the F-15s, and they're unable to locate it.
Yeah, by that point, the two aircraft that were able to see, that had a visual on this UFO, were starting their descent.
Yeah, in Portland.
And the other one, the UFO was staying at altitude, and so they lost visual by the time the F-15s got up there, and they never found it.
Yeah.
Which in the second soundbite, there's a phone call between, I don't know who the guy is.
The guy that is he's the FAA official.
Okay.
So he's with the I think he's with the FAA, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what he is. He's with the FAA, and the other guy is the pilot of Southwest 4712.
Yeah. And he's basically calling to ask him to write a detailed report on everything that he saw, and he had done this. He'd made other phone calls to the other pilots, and was trying to have everything sort of collaborated in an email of reports. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So the last phone call we're about to play here is with this guy talking to the pilot of Southwest 47.
Seattle Center Operations.
This is
What are they calling each other?
4712 Southwest flight.
Hey, I appreciate you giving me a call back.
Yeah, you bet, man.
So, bit of an unusual night here for us.
Yeah, I know. Hey, can I hang on for 1 second, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that. I had to get out of this noisy area here.
So
unusual night for you and for me. I've never, in all my years of flying jets, which is coming up on 30 years, I've never had anybody y'all weren't talking to.
yeah, really strange. We weren't painting them on radar or anything either. So, so what I'm asking you to do, if you wouldn't mind, is if you wouldn't mind sending us an email, kind of describing what you saw, position, description, altitude, any details you can provide us for about how long you saw it and all of that. That would be perfect. Okay. And I'm going to give you a couple of email addresses. If you want to do an ASAP, that's fine, but this is something separate on the side.
Right.
That would be really helpful.
Okay.
We're trying to piece all this together.
Can you send me, if I give you my email address, can you send me who you wanted me to send them to?
Sure.
It's
redacted.
Did y'all have time to scramble anybody to go take a peek?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah.
And can you share any of those details?
Well, the issue was is by the time we got there, you guys were already descending. So, now we don't know what we're looking for with the fighters, right? So
we didn't see anything.
Yeah, but we did, but we
didn't see anything.
Couldn't find it.
They didn't see what we were looking at. Because, there was a United flight and a SkyWest flight that saw them too.
Right, yep, and I've already talked to those pilots.
Oh, you
so they're doing the same thing as you guys and just sending us some details.
And that's crazy because, if it was like a Lear type airplane, probably would not have seen it this clear. This was a white airplane, and it was big, and it was moving at a clip too because we were keeping pace with it. It was probably moving a little faster than we were, but we weren't converging with them, so it was kind of moving away. But man, we watched them.
So it was a larger aircraft then.
It was a larger aircraft, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, any of those specifics and details that you can share would be great.
Yeah, and I would say the closest we got when the control Oakland gave us the first call, he said, hey, I had somebody come up at 37,000 feet at your 1 o'clock and converging. And he goes, but he's not on my radar anymore. Can you take a look out there? And we're like, yeah, we see him. He's like, you see something? And then that's when it kind of started. We're not talking to him. We don't know who he is. And then we watched him. I mean, from Northern California, Oakland Center, all the way till the descent. So probably a good 15 minutes or so. But anyway, yeah, I'll put it all together and respond to those emails that you sent me. And I'd love to know what that was all about. So.
Yeah. Okay. I'll send you an email here in just a couple minutes with the email address to send them to.
Yeah.
So appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, what's your time frame on getting this back? We have a pretty short overnight, and I'd like to put some thought into it with my FO.
Yeah, I mean, probably sooner than later, but I mean,
never a straight answer.
You know, it doesn't have to be, super lengthy. I mean, obviously, the more you have, the better. But we don't want days to go by for sure.
No, I mean, I'll get it to you tomorrow. Okay. But I just want to. My first officer is not coming down for dinner, but I want to put something together tonight. Have him just review it, just make sure we're both on the same page, and then I'll give it to you tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be great with the call sign and the time and where you're going, and all the other specifics you shared with me. That'd be great.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, man.
All right, take care.
Glad to help. See you. Bye.
Dude, that reminds me of like the reports. I think you've talked about this before. I know you've talked to me about it. I don't know if we've gone over it in the podcast, but these reports of UFO sightings that are actual pilots that are saying that they've seen this kind of stuff, and they're it's poo-pooed or whatever. They're like, they don't know, whatever, and you're like, no, these guys are serious. They're not on drugs. They're flying aircraft. They've been flying for 30 years. Like, this dude obviously is enthusiastic about putting everything into the report and being perfectly accurate. He's gonna confirm everything with his first officer.
Right.
There's no bullshit about it, and he's excited about it.
Yeah.
And
he's interested and he's excited.
Yeah. This is not like an offhand thing. Oh, yeah, I saw this thing, and it was weird. And it's like, well, I've just heard in the whole UFO debate so many times, pilots that have seen things have been just, cast off. It's like, there was nothing on the radar, and blah, blah, blah. Whatever you saw, it was like
Venus, fucking, you mistook Venus. Yeah. Well, and the other thing is like these guys, for a long time, you could tell when you're listening to that, you can tell that all of them are afraid to say what it is. Right?
Yeah.
Like that they nobody will say, they're like, are you paying attention to this? This, and then somebody else will say 37,000 feet. Like, they'll refer to it in these like sort of like impromptu code words. They'll say, well, yeah, it's in. They're unable to identify the aircraft. It's white with no markings. Right. But so they're all afraid to say that it's a UFO. Nobody will say this, right?
Yeah. Have you been listening to this?
To all this going on? Yeah, and they're all acknowledging how strange it is, and so the main thing that the reason this was written up in a big story in this press release or whatever, and the reason they did the FOIA is because, this is basically a massive national defense problem, right? This unknown aircraft came screaming down the West Coast all the way into California, turns around and flies at least from Oakland, California, all the way up to Portland, Oregon, at the very least, without being able to be tracked by radar, even though it was within visual sight of multiple airplanes. So we had Southwest 4712, and we had the other, there was an Alaska 45 something or other. There was like 4 at least that had good visuals of it. And then they scrambled the F-15s, 2 fighters, and they couldn't find it. Okay, so this is a big deal. Like, basically, we just got invaded. Our airspace was completely invaded by something totally unknown that kicked the ass of all of our procedures, all of the bureaucracies, all of the fucking radar, all of the equipment that we have, and then escaped.
Yeah, and the weird thing is that it was within visual of these pilots in the air, but their onboard radar, whatever that's called, they have a specific name for it.
Yeah.
Their collision.
Right.
Whatever it's called.
Yeah, the anti-collision.
They're not picking it up.
Right.
But it's like 10 miles that way. Like, they should be picking it up.
Right, they can see everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah.
They can see everybody else. There's some we didn't play this, but you can see they're talking about how they've got, like, one guy's like, well, did you ask 612 or whatever, because he's right over here. Like, the other pilots know where the other aircraft are because they're also on their radar. And then, of course, the air traffic controllers down at the airports, they have a huge radar and they can see everything over the whole state.
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it was very strange. And there's one part, we also didn't play this, but there's one part in one of the phone calls where the girl, we did hear her a couple of times. She says she's like, it's like it went into some sort of stealth mode. Like that's what she said, because it like just, I guess to her it looked like that because it came down and they were able to see it, and then it just vanished off the radar.
Yeah.
And then it was like intermittently appearing randomly.
Didn't it start? It started out coming from the north. And
Yeah, it was coming south.
So on the radar, you see all these planes are all going the same direction from south to north.
Yeah.
And apparently this thing came hauling ass in at 37,000 feet going south.
Yeah.
And then got amidst all these planes and then just did an about face and turned around and started going pretty much the same speed as all the other planes in the same direction.
Northbound, right. Like it was merging with traffic.
Yeah. Really strange.
Yeah. So yeah, the whole thing is very weird, and this is why it's a big deal for these reporters, because they're looking at this as like what's wrong with what's going on with our national defense? Like who was this, right? But I'm looking at it in context of all these UFO reports that I've read and that I've seen over the years, whatever, and this is exactly like them. Like this is so similar to
And they're calling it an airplane and all this stuff, but they don't.
Right. An aircraft, yeah, airplane.
Well, it's obviously an aircraft.
Right.
But you know.
Whatever it was, when they were talking about it coming screaming in from the north, but you get the idea that it was far beyond the capacities of any of these passenger or cargo jets that they had. Like, you know, these guys are up there at 35,000 feet, and they're maintaining, like, you know, standard airspeed. So they're all cruising at, what did he say, 300 knots, right? So they're moving. But this thing, when it was coming southbound, it was really hauling ass. Like they all said that. Like this thing was moving really fast through our airspace, right?
Oh yeah, look at that.
Oh yeah, look at that. Really? Really?
So that first guy is my favorite guy. Oh, look at that.
Oh, look at that.
There it is.
So yeah, this is it's really interesting because it's a high profile case, and what else is interesting about this is that when the various investigative reporters were trying to find out what was going on, everyone involved, the FAA, the people at the Defense Event Network, the people at WADS, the Western Air Defense, which is NORAD. Okay, this is fucking part of NORAD, which is called Bigfoot, by the way, because it's all the Western United States. It's got a giant footprint, so it's Bigfoot. Bigfoot in UFOs. Looking for UFOs is classic. But they all admitted that this was weird and that it happened. So no one is denying any of this, which has been standard operating procedure previous to this, as far as I know. They've always kind of denied. You know, all the various government agencies were like, no. You know, this didn't really happen, or it was a bolide, or it was Chinese lanterns, or, you know, well, they make shit up. Like, I found this old, very old, like, so after Roswell, right? This is black and white. You can find this commercial on YouTube. It's like showing these sailors it's the Navy. They put this commercial out on TV, right? And it shows these guys inflating a weather balloon, right? It's a bunch of like Mylar silvery shit, and they inflate it, and they're like, you know, it's like the United States Navy has determined that a weather balloon, when it gets high altitude, becomes saucer shaped, right? And they basically explain Roswell with a weather balloon in this commercial, right? Mystery solved is what they say at the end of it. It's all U.S. Navy. You know, it's hilarious. But it's frustrating at the same time because the mystery wasn't solved. They're just papering over it. And the official explanations for Roswell over the years has changed like 4 times. First, they said it was a saucer that crashed, right? That was the very first report. I mean, like, they straight up, the guy in charge of the military base there said, we've recovered a crashed saucer, flying saucer. And then right after that, there was another report released saying, no, it was a weather balloon, okay? And then maybe 20 years later, I don't know exact dates, but sometime later, decades later, they explained it away again as something else. And I think the most recent one, the Air Force was saying it was some kind of test flight of something that had crash dummies in it. And that's why people thought they saw alien bodies on the ground, because they were crash test dummies. I'm serious, man. It sounds ridiculous, but these are the explanations, and they just keep changing it.
Sorry, I've been dealing with a little bit of technical
Kyle's
problems here, but
50%.
I figured it out. So I'll laugh at your next joke. I'm just like, I almost didn't really know what you were talking about right there when you started laughing. I was just like, yeah, cool, man. Crash test, yeah. I have no idea what's going on. Okay,
Yeah.
problem solved.
Problem solved. Mystery solved.
Oh, man. I'm still getting used to this new setup where, I'm
Oh yeah, we got the Tangent Cube has been upgraded.
yeah, and I've got the interface set up to be able to hear,
Everything.
record the computer, what's going on with the computer and everything. Everybody's connected to everything. If we ever need to connect to anywhere, it's all online and it's perfect. But I forgot where the volume knob was, and I just found it.
Are you saying that we're all connected?
Yeah, man. Like, if you want to be on the show, you're going to fucking hear it. And you're going to be able to talk to it. And we'll be able to record that.
Wow. It's very new age. We're all connected.
Yeah, we're all
man.
connected, man. I'm a master router.
So we got some other weird news, but we only have a couple minutes left in this segment, so
So we're going to sing a song. Fly, UFOs.
I've been listening to there's on YouTube you can go find these National UFO Reporting Center. So there's like fucking 40 hours at least of recordings from this, and it's basically like they started this thing up in again, it's on the West Coast. The guy's out of Seattle or whatever, but this dude Peter Davenport sits in this call center for years and takes these calls from people that think they saw something weird in the sky. And somebody has taken all these recordings, these hours and hours and hours of tapes, and has kind of cut out the bullshit and basically redacted names and phone numbers or whatever, anything, addresses that they gave out, and then just puts them together where you can just listen to phone call after phone call after phone call of people from all over the United States. Some of them are police, some of them are military guys. There's journalists that call him. Some of the sections are like where he's getting multiple calls on the same event. It's really fascinating. So you can you can listen to it. Just look it up on YouTube, National UFO Reporting Center, and there's 4 or 5 video. They'll be labeled by year. So there's like 1974, 1975, 76, 77. And there's hours and hours of listening there. And some of them are hilarious. Really hilarious. But some of them
Give me
are...
that imitation you were giving me for it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think I'm down. Like, if I had some binoculars, I could see the dang thing. By golly, it flew up to the north and it disappeared after it turned red.
Dude, that's exactly what happened to one of the UFO I saw. God dang thing, just took a right, turned red.
If you had one of those infrared lenses, I got a video recording camera, the 16 millimeter. It's got a 1-inch aperture. And I could really see these god dang things. National Geographic came down here with one of them infrared god dang things, and they were looking at the animals, and they saw Bigfoot.
Get your fucking hands off my IR. That's Troy. That's my Troy impression.
That was a good Troy impression.
We gotta interview Troy at some point.
Yeah.
He's got one of the greatest possible radio voices.
Yeah, and he also has had a really serious encounter with a UFO that he's seen. So it'd be a good.
That's what I'm saying. And he got video footage of it recently with his IR camera.
Yeah, I went out to. I actually, when I found out that this happened, I texted Troy. I was like, dude, tell me everything. And he was, like, are you serious? Like no one cares. No one cares, man. And I was like, dude, I fucking care. I've been researching this shit for forever. So he told me everything, and then I was like, you know what? I want to hear the story, but what I want to do is drive out to the place where you saw it, and you can just walk me through it, and that's what we did. It was fascinating. It was very interesting, the shit that he saw, the things, and like, so I'm coming from a position of having read thousands of reports, listening to all this stuff, like tried to study this phenomenon for years. Troy has never been interested in it, but he has this very serious encounter. So he's coming to it from that perspective, and I'm coming to it from like, so I'm listening to everything that he's saying in context with all the stuff that I know, and it's like everything he's saying is hitting all the
matching all the
I'm just like, oh my god, dude, this is badass. And like the things that he discerned from his sighting were fascinating too, because like some of those things that he discerned right off the bat on his sighting number one, having never been interested in this subject before, have taken the UFO community, the quote unquote ufologists, decades to figure out. And Troy's like picking it up like that, like they're tricking. That was a hologram. They're tricking me. Like I was like, holy shit, dude! Like this is fucking badass. Like he's fucking seeing it. And now he's got all these cameras and everything looking for it. So yeah, we got some good stuff coming up for Troy if we can set up an interview with him. But right now we need to take a break. It has been 30 minutes.
Yeah, we can get Troy in studio though. We don't have to do that.
Yeah, Troy will be in studio. Yeah, for sure.
We got to give him we got to put a ribbon on it.
That's right,
ribbon.
Plus more.
Wait a minute. Let me hear your voice again. Ribbon.
Ribbon.
All right, we're gonna take a snake break.
That's right. We'll be right back.
Limitless conversation by two limited individuals, brothers of the Serpent podcast, talking about UFOs. You didn't see that one coming.
No, I didn't see that one coming. What was that?
I can't help it, man.
Singing along. What was that? We were talking about UFO, or we weren't talking about UFOs, but you were talking about paradigm shifts or whatever, and you used UFO. You were like, I'm looking up at the sky, and then I see a UFO. What was it?
Yeah. So UFOs is not my, it's not a thing that I dive into big time, because I don't know. This might sound real shitty, but I think,
the question is answered, right?
Yeah, well, maybe not answered, but it's just like,
they're real.
They're fucking real, and like I've had some sightings. One major one that was also backed up by like thousands of people in San Antonio.
Yeah,
seeing it go in the sort of north, and I saw it coming from San Antonio, passing me.
Yeah. Yeah, tell that real quick. It was you were up there on the deck with mom.
Yeah,
and dad.
it's me, my wife Laura, parents, mom and dad. And
I was passed out in the tower.
You're inside.
Damn it.
We're up on the deck. We're like hanging out at night. The stars are out. We're all talking, and my mom is just like, "Oh, look at that!" Pointing, and we all turn, and it's San Antonio is off in the distance. You can see just this glow of light from San Antonio, and from that area, this looked like a shooting star / airplane, because it was too slow for a shooting star and too regular, whereas a shooting star kind of typically has a curve or is moving very fast and is bright to dim. This thing was very regular, far too slow for a shooting star, way too fast for a plane, and it comes all the way across the sky, and it's moves past us, and we're now turning the 180 degrees to watch it go, and I see it turn red, split into two light. Okay, it was just a bright light.
Yeah.
Okay, but at first it looked like a dash, like it had width, right? Like a like the lasers or the whatever.
Yeah.
You see a laser in a sci-fi movie or something.
Right.
It looked like that. And then once it passed us, it split into 2 dots, and then they both, or one of them, I think it was just one of them, changed direction, and they both turned red. They went from like this bluish, white, sort of shooting star color, and just turned red, and one of them turned 90 degrees and shot what looked like straight up, and they just got dim and vanished. It was
Wow.
like very quickly. And we were all of us were just like, whoa, what, And so then I was like, okay, wait a minute. Like, this is what I saw. What did you see? And each person went around and described something very similar. We all saw something very similar. Like, my dad didn't see so much of the red shift, but we all saw a 90-degree turn.
Yeah. The split in the 90-degree turn.
Yeah, but there was some differences in the color, but there was somebody else also saw it go red,
Yeah.
It was crazy. And the length of time that it was in the sky, I can't give you exact time, but it was a long time for a shooting star, far too long for a shooting star, and it moved way too far across the sky for a plane.
Yeah.
And there were no blinking lights or anything like that.
Yeah.
No noise associated with it. And then I remember telling you about it like the next day at work or whatever, and you looked it up. You went on to...
I went to MUFON.
MUFON.
MUFON's reporting place on the internet, and looked it up and found like hundreds and hundreds of reports from people all over Texas, really.
Yeah, and mainly in San Antonio, and people in San Antonio saw this thing above them, and they were describing it as a cylinder.
Yeah.
A single thing.
Right.
And that's what it kind of looked like to me. It was a dash flying, like this short line.
Yeah, cigar
moving.
shape, so they call it.
Yeah, but I couldn't see thickness. It just looked like a bright light, right?
Yeah.
A little dash, and it moved, and it got sort of bigger and bigger and bigger, and then when we were turned all the way around watching it go, it split into 2 dots.
Yeah.
And then like one of them went
classic.
up and the other one went this way, and they turned red. It was just like, what the
Yeah.
And so I was theorizing, like, was that a red shift?
Yeah.
Like, was it blue until it actually passed us and
Passed
then
you.
turned red? And how did it change direction so quickly?
Yeah, it's like it doesn't seem to have inertia. Well, what's interesting is if you look at past UFO reports, the color change is always associated with a very intense shift of direction or speed, right? So that people will see them moving, and then there will be a sudden change in color, and then bam, it'll take off in another direction, or it'll suddenly accelerate. Yeah,
yeah, and it looked like after the change in direction, the one that went like straight up looked like it accelerated, just like whew, gone.
Yeah,
and it just vanished like shortly after it changed about 90 degrees.
Yeah.
But anyway, what I was really getting at was that even though I haven't seen a shitload of them or whatever, or I haven't had like an encounter with a freaking alien or anything, I still think that it's extremely likely that occurs, and it's just not something that I'm trying to verify.
Right.
Like I see this sort of,
and most of the
like insatiable desire to verify it.
Yeah, well,
I don't have that.
Most of the public discourse over UFOs is involved with arguing with people who think they're not real.
Yeah, and I don't care about those people.
I don't
what they think.
I don't care about them either. And I'm saying, like, for me though, the big question is, what are they really? Because I don't think that the EBE theory, the extraterrestrial biological entity theory, really holds up. Like, in other words, like what you saw, that thing that you saw, doesn't really fit the idea of what they call, quote unquote, nuts and bolts, like spaceship from another world. Like, why does a spaceship from another world come screaming through our atmosphere and then suddenly splits into 2 different objects, changing colors and having no, like really the fact of it going from a cylinder shape to 2 dots is just like,
yeah, what the hell?
Right. That seems more like something else.
Right, and that reminds me of the NASA videos you showed me with the little freaking horseshoe crabs swimming around in space. Those little jellyfish looking, freaking.
Yeah, the
things.
The shuttle tether experiment.
I mean, they're clear as day. Like these things are like sort of pulsing and just swimming all over the place. Like they look like little microorganisms or something, but they're massive and in space.
And they're attracted to the electrical discharge of this thing. Yeah.
So I read an article recently. I don't remember who published it or what, but it was about Mars, and it was just today or yesterday, and it was like, okay, scientists think that there may be dormant biological, biology or whatever, microbiology on Mars in the desert that's actually just dormant, and as soon as there's the right atmosphere, it'll all come alive because they found a similar type of biology in the Atacama
Atacama desert in Chile.
Way up high in the Andes or wherever it is.
Yeah.
And the amount of rainfall is just like
0.002 inches per year.
And so these things can stay dormant for like hundreds of, possibly thousands of years that they're realizing now. And then as soon as there's rainfall, they just all come alive and just start reproducing and do all this shit. And then when it dries up, they all go dormant again.
Yep.
And that sort of thing has seemed plausible to me for a long time. And I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist or anything. But it doesn't. This idea that the quote unquote habitable zone is necessary for life doesn't really jive with me. I don't.
Yeah.
I think, how do we know? Like that book by Larry Niven, I can't remember what it was called, but Wantu is like this being that is he
I think that's Paul Sanderson, but
Oh, Paul Sanderson. I'm sorry. He lives inside the star. Right, and he's like neutrinos and shit all connected together, and he's like this. It's basically this massive brain, but he has the ability to control things on the quantum and atomic level.
Yeah, he's like a Boltzmann brain living inside the star.
Yeah,
he's like a
and how do we know that that's not possible? I mean, I think that's totally possible.
Right. He uses tachyons, which are always faster than light. Like the idea of tachyons is like if you look at light speed as not a limit, but as a barrier, a boundary, picture light speed as being a line in a graph that goes on either side. Anything that's below light speed cannot approach it or surpass it, but anything that's above light speed cannot approach it or go below it. Right. So tachyons are above. So tachyons can never go slower than or equal to the speed of light. And they're theoretical particles, but we would not be able to detect. We don't know how to detect them if they're real because they are.
Everything that we have is below the line, and we can't build anything out of the things that aren't.
Yeah,
because they're hauling ass.
Yeah, they're all hauling ass. Yeah.
How do I get? Well, first you have to haul ass faster than light. Then you can build a detector.
Right.
That can detect those things.
And so you could. Yeah. And so one way to look at that really is interesting about this. One way to look at that is light speed as a boundary between two different dimensions of speed. Yeah. Right. Like tachyons may interact with our universe in terms of gravity or whatever, but
like they may interact with our universe through a force,
right?
But
through
not necessarily.
They won't physically interact with it. So the UFO question for me, especially when you look at historical stuff, like I'm talking about really old stuff, like I mean it's tied in with the world religions. Like the visions of Fatima, the Ezekiel's wheel, the stuff about I mean even in Exodus when the what do they call it, the theophany when the Israelites have come out of Egypt and they all surround this mountain. What is it? It's the one he comes down with
where Shem Yaza and all those dudes.
Well, it wasn't that mountain, but I think it's not Ararat, was it?
No, I don't think it's Ararat.
No, it's not Ararat. But it's something like that. It's one of those mountains out there. Basically, it says that there's 600,000 families, basically 600,000 male Israelites, and then all their families and all their wives and children and everything like that. And they surround the base of this mountain, and then Moses climbs it. And they all see, the theophany is that they all see the quote unquote glory of God come down in fire and smoke onto the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And he goes up there and gets irradiated and God gives him the
And that's an interesting thing when you look at all the places where glory is used, like in the Bible, in the biblical text.
Spaceship.
It's always accompanied. It's though they come down in their glory, or their glory was taken away and they were stuck here on Earth.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so was the glory actually just what is the definition of glory?
Right.
And then if you're not looking at it in terms of like, oh, I'm seeking glory by kicking ass in a war.
Glorious.
Right. But in the same way, you can see how that sort of cognitive definition developed over time because these things were involved in war. Like God would come down and just in all of his glory and just like kick ass. You know?
It's also like sacred and words like that are circularly defined. Yeah. You know, something that's sacred is holy. Things that are holy are sacred.
Right, but I just mean that word in particular is like always associated with traveling.
Yes.
In the sky. It's always got fire and light and loud sounds and everything associated with it. And it is always associated with the transportation of someone from earth to heaven or heavens to earth.
Yeah. So I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I was eventually, but I want to talk about it now. Like I read this fascinating study on that whole period. Okay, so Moses and the Israelites come out of Egypt, and at some point they build the ark, right? But then there's also this weird thing with manna, right? This is manna stuff,
right?
But
Spaceship ramen.
If you look at there's a book. There's Spaceship ramen.
Just drop it ramen. It's like the cheapest food. It'll keep you alive. I can get an old carton of it for 25 space dollars. Starbucks.
That's right. Fucking God's dropping his fucking space ramen on it. Oh my God. So
it even sounds the same. Manna
ramen. But yeah. The interesting thing though also is the word manna is used in Eastern, so in India and then on Easter Island, manna is the power of what was Brett saying? He gave them water. He gave them rain too. So yeah, water and ramen. What an awesome God. That's right. Yeah, and he's right. The mountain is Sinai. Yeah. Okay, so there's this fascinating study about this, like the whole thing with manna. There's a sort of a Jewish Hebrew esoteric book. Okay, it's an ancient book. Okay, called the Zohar, Zoltan, right? If you read the Zohar, it's like the how do you say it? The Vimanika Shastra in terms of ancient texts. Like you're looking at it and you're like, this is an engineering book, right?
Yeah.
The Vimanika Shastra it's not an ancient text about myths. It's basically like telling you how to build these machines and how to fucking fly them and everything. So the Zohar is the same way, except that it is dealing with the maintenance of a machine that it calls the Ancient of Days.
Wow.
Okay. And it's interesting.
I've heard that line like in worship songs in church.
Right. The Ancient of Days
something
has been sort of merged in with Christianity and stuff, and they use it to refer to God. Okay. They're talking to God as the Ancient of Days, right? But the Zohar is clearly talking about a device. Now, when you read it initially, if you don't know enough to look beneath all because it talks about faces and like it's the same thing we talked about last week, where there's body parts that are being associated with parts of the machine, the arms and the face and the mouth.
Yeah, there's always all the symbolic connections. I think those were either purposefully developed in order to preserve the story after the loss of the technology, or just accidentally,
or to obfuscate it on purpose, right?
To hide it,
yeah.
To hide it, to protect it, to preserve it.
Yeah. So the Ancient of Days, in the Zohar, the description of, and it's all this maintenance. Like here's how you put it together. Here's the things you have to do. Like here's the things you
anoint it with oil.
That's right. That's right. And
better check that oil.
And it starts telling you what will happen. You'll see fire here, and then blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. And eventually you end up with manna coming down from the machine. Okay, so it's like. These guys have done just like with the Vimanika Shastra, where modern people have kind of looked over it and then sort of drawn diagrams of what they think is being described. These machines are being described. The same thing was done with the Ancient of Days. And they basically say this is what was being kept in the Ark. And it's some kind of like thermonuclear / plasma powered device that is able to I can't remember exactly all the details, but it's able to produce food, okay? And it's extremely, it looks like technology. They call it the Ancient of Days because it's older than anything that anybody knows. They got it from Egypt. Okay, so the idea of the ark and so Moses swipes this thing. He knows they're about to go into the desert where there's no food and no water. Okay, he swipes this thing, which is able to provide like millions of people with food and water every day through some kind of high energy process. This is why the ark was so dangerous. This is why they could use it for a weapon too, right? Anyway, it was a fascinating thing. Like,
so this thing can manipulate matter. Like,
yes,
I don't know this for sure. I'm just going to throw this one out there and possibly be an idiot. But the idea that you could actually get everything from the atmosphere, all the atoms you need to make food, and water,
Chan.
I mean, we know that.
Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Chan. That's everything we eat and everything we know is made of that. Chan.
Yeah, so you can make water and you make food with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
This also, it makes sense that that the mana is, well, you know that like when there was a rule that you could only collect enough for one day.
Right, you couldn't keep it.
And everybody knows that if you make too much ramen, you can't eat it later. It's disgusting.
That's right. That is totally true. And it's like the great thing about ramen is it lasts forever if you don't cook it.
That's right. Ramen chan.
Right. This is bricks. That's what they're doing. Let us make bricks.
Yeah, and you can drop it from space and it won't kill anyone.
That's right. It's yeah. And it crushes it, which is what you need to do anyway.
Oh, that's terrible.
But so the Ancient of Days looks like an out-of-place artifact. And if you think of the story, if you think of the story of the Ethiopians who supposedly now have the Ark in one of their rock-cut temples, right, where they've been keeping it for thousands of years, ever since Menelik went up there and got it from Solomon. After the Queen of Sheba went up there and met him, and they had a kid, right? Remember that story?
Yeah.
So Menelik goes up there and he gets the Ark of the Covenant out of Jerusalem before whoever it was, the Persians come and sack it.
Yeah.
And now it's in Ethiopia, and Graham Hancock meets these guys that are supposedly taking care of it, and it's killing them, right? And that matches with the Zohar story of the Ancient of Days being this, like they describe. It's sort of like the story of Mohenjo-Daro. Or if you look in it's the Mahabharata, the story of the ancient war, where they like very accurately describe.
It's the Mahabharata.
Mahabharata. And the Rig Veda. And they describe the war of Rama, but the war between Rama and the Osirian and the Atlantean Empire, okay? Where the Rama is given the spear of whatever, heaven. I can't remember what it is. The spear of Vishnu or something like that. And Vishnu was like, this is a badass weapon, but don't ever use it. And Rama's like, okay, I won't ever use it. Fuck you, Atlanteans. Right, he uses them. Okay. And the description that is given of what happens to the people who are, all the collateral damage after the spear is used, it says like their hair and their fingernails begin to fall out. Yeah. Their skin burned.
Radiation poisoning.
Yeah, their skin burned, and the only way... So they all started walking towards the river and just like immersing themselves in the water because that was the only way to like sort of alleviate the pain, even though it didn't stop anything. The crops were poisoned, the animals were poisoned, the land was poisoned for thousands of years. It's... And, Brett's mentioning Oppenheimer. Yeah, so Oppenheimer, the guy who ran the Manhattan Project to build a nuclear bomb for the United States, he was asked by journalists after they had detonated the first test bomb. Journalists asked him, so was this the first... This is the first one that you guys tested or whatever? Was the first, nuclear bomb that was blown up? And he was like, in modern times, yes. Like, that's what he said. Like, he fucking knew. And after the first test,
wasn't there a place where they found the skeletons they were laying in the street and they were vitrified and shit, and there were traces of like
that's
radiation in their bones and stuff.
Mohenjo-Daro. That's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's exactly like you picked up on exactly what I'm talking about. So like all these things come together.
Bad with names.
It's Mohenjo-Daro.
He's like talking about Yeah, so it's like Mohenjo-Daro.
Yeah.
10 minutes later, isn't like
It's also called the Indus Valley Civilization or Harappan. You know, any of those?
No, but I mean, I recognize the name Mohenjo-Daro probably because you've said it many times, but
Yeah. Mohenjo-Daro
not associated with the story that I remember.
Right. So before they excavated Mohenjo-Daro, the mainstream idea of Indian civilization was that it was like, maybe it was only 100 years, it was centuries old. Okay.
Yeah.
They just completely denied anything. Like the Indians themselves, like, no, we have thousands of years, and they're like, no, you guys are like,
y'all are noobs.
Yeah, you guys are noobs.
What do you know?
What do you know? But they had all these ancient texts that they claimed were ancient, but the European archaeologists just didn't want to believe it. It was a standard story. The European archaeologists show up thinking they know everything, tell the natives their own history, and the natives are like, no, this is our history. And they're like, no, it's not. But then they keep finding things that prove it. So they finally they start digging this city in the Indus Valley, which is right between Pakistan and India. It's on the border, which makes it a contentious area. They start excavating this city, which is like fucking fantastically planned. It's enormous. It was clearly not. Clearly didn't like sort of grow spontaneousage. People just putting shit where they wanted. It was the whole thing was planned all at once, and they built it all at once. It has It has sewage plumbing and freshwater plumbing that are separate from each other, and it's fucking 4000 BC. Okay, so this is like very old and extremely advanced. It was far more advanced than anything that anybody thought existed at the time. They found what you were talking about. They found so when they got down to street level in Mohenjo-Daro, there were skeletons just laying in the streets, like all over the place, holding hands. In groups or whatever, and they're laying in the streets, and like they're not disarticulated, they're not taken apart.
Yeah.
No predators fed on them, and
yeah, that's right.
The radiation levels were like 50 times normal. Okay, which is, it's weird.
Yeah, just get on Google Earth and look.
Yeah.
At North Africa.
It's
just
blasted.
What happened?
Yeah. Not only that, there are in the desert and the area around that, and specifically I know north of Baghdad and Iraq in the desert. I think that's where, but don't quote me on that. But anyway, in Iraq, in the desert, in the 1950s, a geologist was driving, he had his Jeep or whatever, and he's driving through the desert, and he starts hearing all this crunching noises. And he's like, what the fuck? And he gets out of the Jeep, and he's like, he sees that he's on this massive expanse of green glass, crushed green glass in the desert. It's called trinitite. Okay, it's fused silica sand. Okay, and it fuses into this like weird green glassy shit or whatever. It looks exactly the same as the fused silica sand at the Nevada test sites where we blew up our nuclear bombs. It's the same shit. Okay, it's exactly the same.
Insane.
And it's called trinitite, and there are these enormous fucking circles of it in the deserts in the Sahara in Iraq. Okay, in Iran and Pakistan. Okay, so basically, they can look at this shit and they can determine how old it is, and it's fucking like ice age, end of ice age old. Okay, so they have all these theories like, well, it was probably a meteorite, but there's no crater. Then they theorize that, well, it's fucking one of the, where it comes in and explodes over the desert, but doesn't ever hit. But you should still find all this evidence of non-terrestrial stuff. You should find iridium, and there should be other signatures that aren't there. So basically, it looks exactly like what we see in the Nevada test areas, like a terrestrial explosion. And clearly, it would had to have been done by technology because there's no explanation natural for these kinds of explosions. So when you combine that, with Oppenheimer quoting. Was it the Bhagavad Gita? He quotes, he says, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds," which is what Rama said when he threw his spear of destruction. Yeah. Oh, but Brett's given us a bunch of. If the radiance of 1,000 suns were to burst at once into the sky, that would be like the splendor of the mighty one. Was Oppenheimer's translation of that moment in the desert of New Mexico? Yeah. So it's like, it's weird to me because so Oppenheimer, you can tell by the name, is clearly a German guy, right? He was like a Operation Paperclip dude or whatever. Well, maybe he wasn't with Paperclip, but he was a German scientist, like Einstein, had kind of fled to the United States, and the Germans at the period of World War II were heavily into ancient stuff. They were looking for ancient artifacts because they were convinced that if they could find that there were certain ancient artifacts, like things like the Spear of Destiny and the Holy Grail, that were actually, they believed that they were actually technological devices, that they were like out-of-place artifacts or what are they called? Anachronisms?
Yeah,
something that exists out of time.
Those facts that you were just talking about, they line up perfectly with the story that Sitchin, Sitchin's version of the ancient Sumerian text, where whether or not you want to believe that these people were extraterrestrials, came from Nibiru and all this other crazy shit, doesn't matter. The point is that what those texts are describing are people that aren't us, or were not them at the time, that they were more powerful, they had high technology.
They were giants.
And they got all this stuff going around the planet. They could do amazing things with stone. They could build massive structures, and they started having wars with each other. And they fought over these areas of the world, right? And the main place that they fought over was the Fertile Crescent and all that shit.
And they destroyed it by doing that. Yeah.
And then what we were talking about last week, this idea that we became vain and no longer lived in harmony and we destroyed ourselves, may not be talking about us.
Right. One of the most fascinating things that Sitchin said was that these, and other people have said it too, but is that these ancient stories are not our stories.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say. Like, it just hit me. Like, if this society of these beings, the Anunnaki or whatever, had lived here for however long, like a long time, and they developed all this shit, and what they left behind were stories, that they had written or whatever, and then they leave or they destroy each other, but we're still here.
Yeah.
And we have shorter lifespans, but we were able to survive all these cataclysms.
Yeah.
Then we start digging up these ancient texts and copying them and everything, and it sounds like it's us talking about ourselves, but it's not.
Right, and
them talking about themselves.
We're digging up the ancient texts, but also some people have retained these ancient texts from their ancestors' associations with the Anunnaki, right?
Yeah.
They've carried them, handed them down from time immemorial or whatever. Like, there's all these kind of like paleo contact points in all these different histories, right? Where like the Hopi, they meet somebody on the West Coast. First of all, in the Hopi legends, they say that they were at the time of the last cataclysm, the destruction of the third world coming into the fourth world, right? So at this time, they were led through the desert by a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of smoke by day,
right.
Which is like, what the fuck? That's exactly like, and they're not copying it. This legend is very, very fucking old, okay? And it basically leads them all the way to the West Coast. So they're somewhere in California probably, and they meet somebody there who they call, I can't remember the name that they give him, but he's basically Viracocha, Inky.
Yeah.
Right? And Inky gives them 3 artifacts, and I don't know if I've told this story before, but he gives them 3 artifacts, and he like outlines this sort of plan for migration across the continent that will last for thousands of years and will end in a specific place. Okay, and they split up into 3 tribes, and they do this long migration where the 3 tribes go and they make places to live, and each one has one of the artifacts. One of the artifacts makes water out of nothing, and I don't know what the other 2 do. They're secret. But one of them was supposedly a jar that would just never empty out. It would always be full of water. And it's interesting because if you look at the Chaco Canyon civilization, basically the Pueblo people, they were supposedly the ancient Anasazi, right? The Hopi are associated with them. Those were their ancestors. None of those places, like Chaco Canyon, where there's no source of water. Like, There's no place that they could have dug a well even way back there in the past.
It couldn't have been like a glacial stream or creek or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly the canyon was cut by water at some time in the but they were living in it, so it was dry at the time, and there's no fucking source of water. They didn't have any wells.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like, where did their water come from? Right. It's interesting because you kind of have all these little towns and cities that have no water source, and yet here's this legend of this artifact that fucking just never ran out of water, so they didn't need a water source, and they could make their cities or towns wherever. Right. And that kind of made them safe from.
All you need to make water is to burn hydrogen.
That's right.
Burn hydrogen and you'll get water.
Right. And supposedly, I mean, the Hopi are still extant today, and they supposedly still have the artifacts. They're kept secret, but they use them in their yearly ceremonies, waiting for the return. After which they say that the traditions of their people will cease, which is ominous. Hello. But if you look at the pattern of migrations that they took across the United States, and they end up in the Hopi Mesas, right? The Hopi Mesas are these in the middle of the fucking the desert out there. There's 3 of these enormous mesas in the desert, and that's where each tribe ended up. So the 3 different ones that split up, they all ended up with their own mesa, and that's where they all are now. If you look at the pattern of the migration across and where they made cities, it makes Orion on the whole fucking continent, and the 3 mesas are the belt.
Wow.
And this pattern was given to them by this paleo contact they had with this person who was in the process of leaving the planet, but he was trying to save these little groups of humans, and I hope
he gave him his shoulder rivers.
Right.
He's like, here, take these shoulders.
Now I know where to go to get shoulder rivers. The Hopi.
All right, we got to take a break.
Yeah.
And snakes.
Yeah.
Go with courage.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the second hour, Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Wait, let me say that again. Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Snake Bros. We were talking about UFOs and ancient aliens and paleo contact and making Orion in the desert and shoulder rivers.
Yeah, and nuclear explosions turning deserts into glass, or actually making deserts.
Yeah, trinitite. And there's also the vitrified forts of Scotland, where all these forts on these high hilltops that have not been used for thousands and thousands of years, all their stones have been melted together by some incredible heat.
Ancient nukes.
That's right, ancient nukes.
So the official show observer wanted to weigh in on this whole topic.
That's right.
Go ahead, Brett. What's the deal?
On the desert biomes.
So, by the way, this is like my one contribution for the next 3 months to actual show content.
Not true.
Hey, fuck you, man.
So, the thing that's always bothered me about the way that climatologists describe deserts, right? So you've got like the American Southwest, where it's just this natural dry place, and you've got like this chalky clay dust for dirt. Okay?
Yeah.
And then you have a place that's on the freaking equator that should have a climate like fucking the Amazon in South America, and it's a giant sand dune like plain.
Yeah.
But that's because deserts happen. Well, deserts happen on the leeward side of mountains because the clouds have already dropped all the water. Where are the mountains in West Africa?
Yeah.
Like nothing about the explanation of deserts applied to that region, or the Middle East for that matter, really works out.
Right.
It also gave me an interesting thought that think of the observable effects of Chernobyl, Fukushima Daiichi, like the detonations in Japan.
Yeah.
Imagine a global, like, nuclear war, and the fallout, nuclear winter-wise. Wouldn't it be awesome if the consistent rise in our planet's temperature is the climate sort of finding its equilibrium again after an all-out nuclear war?
Yeah. Yeah, so basically what you're suggesting is the possibility that there was a nuclear war sometime in the ancient past, and that kicked off the most recent glaciation?
It basically, yeah. I mean, everything that we see that just shows up as this what in the fuck is going on with the weather?
So that would be that would place it more than 50,000 years ago, according to.
Which is fine.
Yeah, I know. I mean that actually is in line in a way with the Sumerian text.
Yeah, with the ancient text. Yeah, and the Vedas.
So you had written this thing that says, I'm wondering, deserts don't naturally exist. We can't find them happening naturally anywhere ever.
Right.
In other words, we don't find them
they're
appearing. Yeah.
stationary. They don't grow. They don't change into deserts. They either are now and forever will be, or they aren't. Like even the ones that come closest to desert biomes still fluctuate within a like very different. It's like I think it's a difference of about 8 inches of rain over an entire year.
Yeah,
and nothing ever moves towards being a desert as we've observed it.
Right. What you're saying is like deserts aren't showing up. They're not like appearing.
They're not like sand traps shifting around the golf course and shit. We're just like they're there. And
right. So it's either there has to be a cataclysmic change to the overall conformation of the global climate, or some massive force would have to be, enacted upon a normally non-desert region.
Yeah.
And the Sahara itself, as far as I know, is the only giant sand dune desert. Period. End of story.
Australia.
There are no other ones.
Australia has.
Australia also.
Yeah.
That's right.
And
which is another one where the climatology explanation doesn't make sense. It's in the middle of the ocean, and there's no mountains to catch the water to keep it from where the desert is.
But when
what's going on?
I guess my only, the only thing that I would say to the contrary is that when you say they don't naturally exist, they could, if it was. But you're saying like it requires a catastrophe.
I think what he's saying, he says we can't find them happening naturally.
Right.
In other words, there's nowhere that's turning into a desert.
Right. So for like the uniformitarian,
we can explain it.
Yeah.
Are like on the
basically
far
uniformitarianism
side of a mountain
doesn't
range from an
explain
ocean.
Yeah.
Like the American Southwest, the eastern side of the Rockies.
What I'm meaning is
come down is very dry.
If an impact could cause a desert, that's a natural occurrence. But
okay.
So it's kind of like what you're saying. I think what you're saying is, I don't want to sound like that chick that this recent thing. So what you're saying is, have y'all seen that shit?
No. What are you talking about?
No.
This guy, Robert Peterson or something.
Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah,
it's like there's this. He just got this interview, whatever, and it's become this big YouTube sensation. And she's like telling him, "So what you're saying is," every time, and she gets it wrong, every time. So what you're saying is that the uniformitarian model doesn't account for deserts. Like we don't see them slowly, gradually forming or moving or going away or whatever. Yeah. Coming into existence, going out of existence.
Progression of a desert. So if you think of the Rockies as an example, because it'll probably be familiar for most of the listeners, and what you guys have talked about with the Rocky Mountains being pushed up or carved out from the deglaciation as the ice sheet moved south. The result of that is that on the west side of the Rockies, you have these areas like the growing plains of California, where you've got great weather all the time. It's rainy. It's great lands to grow food. On the opposite side of those mountains, you have
it's arid. Yeah.
The blasted lands of Utah. That is a thing that climatology explains as to why is there no rainfall here. There is no explanation for Australia and North Africa.
Right.
It would make sense, though, that if you had massive nuclear explosions that are going 10, 20, 30 miles into the upper atmosphere and pushing everything away, that you could potentially create some sort of like standing pattern of weather that could do that.
Right. So
I don't know. Or you just burn all the moisture out of the atmosphere there.
Well, one thing that is interesting about like regional climates, and I mean even global climate, is that it's feedback responsive. So like you have you have a large impact, like say the one that killed off the dinosaurs or whatever. Okay, just for example, this one is it's a global changer. It changes the whole globe. So when it impacts in the ocean, it throws up a fuckload of water vapor. And because the most of the energy is absorbed by the water, because like the impactor comes down, tunnels through the ocean and hits the seafloor, and before the resultant explosion of the seafloor, the water is able to close over top of it, so that explosion is absorbed. All that heat is absorbed by the water. Whereas when an impact on land, the explosion is mostly most of the energy is thrown back out into space. Okay, so all that heat, a lot of it is to escape. But then a shitload of dust is thrown up into the atmosphere on a land impact. So that all that dust, the heat escaping plus all that dust in the atmosphere blocks it out a shitload of sunlight for 50 years, whatever, and then you end up with lots of snowfall, and you end up with lots of snow cover, and then that snow cover starts to become ice, and then once the dust clears, the albedo of the Earth has like drastically increased. The albedo is the reflective ability of it, right? So there's all this white, and now it's reflecting sunlight so much back out into space that it stays cold. Okay, so this causes a glaciation, an ice age. Then you have one come in and it hits the ocean, right? And the opposite thing happens. It throws up all this water vapor. Water vapor is like the biggest greenhouse gas. So it's trapping all this sunlight and shit. Plus all the heat itself was trapped by the water.
Wait, whoa. Carbon monoxide and dioxide are the most powerful greenhouse gases.
Yeah. Just fact check it. Yeah. Sorry about that. Anyway, so once all that ice melts and the reflective, because ice is like highly reflective, all that white snow and shit, all those crystals. Right. Once all that shit is melted, and you're back to the greens and the browns and the dark grays and everything of the regular Earth's surface, the albedo drops drastically, which means the Earth is now absorbing rather than reflecting all that sunlight, and you maintain a warm climate. So desert areas, highly arid, their albedo is high because of all the silica sand, but it isn't the same as ice. But if you notice, the Antarctic is arid. The amount of snowfall that the Antarctic gets is tiny. Okay, it's very small. It is basically a desert, but it's covered in ice. Okay, so you have the same effect. The area over the Antarctic is acting as a repulsor for the clouds that would come over, because all this energy is being bounced back or something. I don't know. I'm just saying that, like, you get these regional climates. So over the desert of the Sahara, it's arid because the sunlight is coming in and then bouncing back off the sand, right? And it's kind of pushing it's like a column of energy that's keeping the clouds from rolling across there. Or when they do roll across there, it's so hot they don't form droplets and fall.
Yeah, so you're describing sort of like there's a threshold, basically, that a system in a region will become fairly stable.
Yes.
Once this threshold is reached of either energy absorption or energy reflection.
Yes.
So once you have a desert, and we were talking about how they naturally exist or not. It doesn't matter. Once you have one,
it wants to stay.
It wants to stay there.
Yes.
And if you don't have one, you're probably not going to get one unless there's something
drastic happens.
Yeah, a cataclysm is basically that's kind of the idea I was getting.
Like Arizona, most of Arizona is like that because of the meteor crater. Like the meteor crater is fairly recent geologically speaking, and whatever that was, that nickel iron meteor that came in and impacted there, it ripped up all of the forest. The place was like heavily forested and shit. And you can look at it if you look at it on Google Earth. Clearly, the place has been stripped. It looks like an area of like skin that's been rubbed raw, like all the way down to the red shit. Like all the stuff, all the life has been torn away from it, and now it's sitting there as a fucking desert. It has no organics in it whatsoever. You know.
But then there's petrified forests nearby.
Yeah.
But that made me think of back to, you brought up Utah.
The Uinta
now,
Basin.
When we were in Moab, I went and was like looking around at the petroglyphs and stuff, and I was doing the research on, like all these people lived here and they were drawing all over these rocks. And so I was kind of reading about who they were, what was going on, and I learned that the prevailing theory, the idea is that it used to be heavily forested. It was like a, much more like a jungle there because of these monsoons that would come up from the
Atlantic.
Or they're coming up from sort of like the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
And and they would travel all the way up through Texas, and they were always bringing all this rainfall and stuff up all the way up into Utah. And they slowly started going away and coming less and less frequently, and now they
don't ever happen.
Like they don't ever happen. So the place has since dried up, and all the trees are gone, and all the forestation is gone. It's just all rocks, and there's some muddy rivers, you know.
Yeah, seasonal creeks and shit. I mean, like, do you think that that's correct?
No, probably not. But I'm just saying that I don't know where they got the data for these monsoons, but I think it's also connected to this whole El Nino La Nina idea.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I'm just saying that you know this idea that this sort of desert in Utah did gradually form because of the gradual, you know, decline of these monsoons that were moving up.
And the other thing, if you think, because I always think of
and
like
the gradually increasing interference of the gradually growing Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess this was over, you know, like within the last 10,000 years.
Yeah,
we're talking about.
But like
and probably more like, you know, 4 or 5.
Yeah, but I also think like the area we're talking about has these enormous granite like worms. I don't know how to describe them. Like they're these long granite outcrops that stick sometimes thousands of feet above the like limestone sedimentary rock valleys that are between them, right?
Yeah.
But on top of some of those granite things is more sediment, and like you were talking about, like you had seen a giant slab of that sediment had slid off the top of one of those granite things, and it had a fucking dinosaur footprint in it, right? So what we're looking at here is something that has been dug out by massive water action.
Right. So when we go back to this idea, like you know, where we talked about what's his name, the geologist guy,
Randall Carlson.
Randall Carlson's research on the impacts on the Laurentide ice sheet.
Yeah.
You know, within the last 12,000 years, it was like about 12,000 years ago or whatever. I think a more viable idea is that there were still big chunks of the ice and all of that water up there.
Yeah.
And in that situation, you sort of have the same, you know, barely or basically stable system where you've got all this ice that's cooling, but it's going to totally change the weather patterns in the area. So you could have that drawing more rainfall or whatever.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then as those melt or whatever over
and then
time,
when they catastrophically melt, they carve those deep canyons through the granite things down deep, right? And then you'll have water. Also, he says that those impacts cause torrential rains all over the planet for a long time. So you could end up with potentially like the place is a wetland for a long time. It had these enormous floodwaters first, but then it reduces down to rivers or whatever. So it's got all this water pouring through it. It's the remnants of the glaciers still melting. Yeah. And all this torrential rain still happening from all this shit, right? And then you have this forest. And then that water dries up. So the forest is kind of an anomalous thing in the first place. Like it's coming from the end of Cataclysm. You see what I'm saying? That's what I was thinking. Like in other words, I don't think that the forest was like this 10,000 year long thing that was because of monsoons that were regular and then they slowly petered out. I'm thinking like the forest was the result of the cataclysm at the end of it, you know, and then they died out because it went back to being. Well, I mean, the place was scoured by the floodwaters.
Well, that just made me think of an interesting idea. Some of the petroglyphs were so high on these cliffs that there's no. I mean, they're just sheer flat. Like, how did they get up there?
Yeah.
So I had before imagined like these massive trees, and they're just hanging off this tree, carving these petroglyphs on the side of this cliff.
Yeah.
But then the other idea is that maybe there was actually some sediment there.
The ground level was there.
Or maybe it was a cave.
Yeah.
And they carved these petroglyphs inside a cave, and then this cataclysm happens, and it rips it all away, and then, you know, hundreds of years later, there's these other Indians, and they're looking way up on that cliff, and they're seeing all these petroglyphs up there, and so they start drawing petroglyphs down at the level that I'm standing at, because there's some down there, and you can see they go up high as a guy can reach, and maybe a couple of them get way up there.
Yeah,
you know, you're on somebody's shoulders doing it,
right?
But then 50 feet above that, there's like this whole other section.
Yeah,
and it's like, what?
Now, am I correct? I may be remembering this wrong, but what was it that the ones that were up high were sort of pastoral? and the ones that were down at like sort of face level were more like there's like weird horned
I don't
gods and
know.
shit.
I don't know.
Because I was thinking like the Indians that were drawing the ones that are up high, they're like everything's great and there's no cataclysm or whatever, and then the ones that are down low after the cataclysm is like all fucking shit. And there's lightning bolts and people dying. I don't know.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
So what else, Brett? You said you had one other.
Okay, so here's the thing that I was really driving at. Sand dune deserts make no sense without a nuclear explosion and like massive numbers of them. So I don't know how familiar either of you are with something called the nuclear fusion sequence.
Yeah.
So the
familiar with it.
last stage of the nuclear fusion sequence before you have a complete dying out of nova of a star is the silicon fusing
to iron.
Right. So after a star completes the oxygen burning process, its core is composed primarily of silicon and sulfur. If it has sufficiently high mass, it further contracts until its core reaches temperatures in the range of 2.7 to 3.5 GK. I guess it's like jillion Kelvin, really hot. I don't know. At these temperatures, silicon and other elements can photodisintegrate, so they emit an alpha particle, and the burning process creates a rearrangement. One of the end products is iron. It also makes sulfur, argon, cadmium, titanium, a bunch of heavy stuff, but that's the end of the fusion process. So if you have a nuclear reaction, like a nuclear bomb, the end result of that bomb, because it doesn't have the energy to sustain to go into the final phase of fusion. So it would release silicon. It would create sand.
Yeah.
Deserts.
Nuclear. Okay, wait. Are you talking about fission bombs or fusion bombs?
Fusion.
Okay. Those are different.
So the other interesting thing on the side of that is, go into your backyard and look at the grass, like the dirt, take all the moisture out of it, and tell me, do you see giant sand dunes? No.
Well, another place you get giant sand dunes is the beach.
Yeah, the beach.
So, if you could blow up a bomb on sediment and perhaps get sand.
But the difference between beach sand and desert sand is that you look at a microscope. The desert sand is all these little cubes of silicate, and the beach sand is like tiny little shells of microorganisms.
That's what I was saying. Like, so you have an old beach, you have an old ocean floor, and then you blow up some,
Oh, I see.
Atomic bombs on that.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, I mean the trinitite is silicate glass, and eventually it will be crushed into little cubes.
Yeah.
Right. Right now it's not. It's big pieces, but eventually, in whoever knows how long, it'll degrade into tiny little pieces. It's a beautiful green, by the way. It looks like somebody like smashed a giant green bottle. Like they're clear and they're thick, and they're this like gorgeous green color, which is weird. Silicate sand is usually a yellow orange.
All I'm saying is, just to recap, is that all of this stuff about just the strangeness of these sand dune deserts and all of this weird shit with radiation and ancient sites and all of these ancient texts that are talking about people destroying the planet or destroying each other or wiping each other out, all makes sense. Like, it all flows together with the idea of UFOs and all, you know what I'm saying? Like, so, I mean, it seems obvious that there was either, we created, or some beings, some aliens or whatever, created the technology to wreak havoc, or it was done by a natural process like, an extraterrestrial object exploding or something.
Or even that they were advanced human type hominids, maybe not Homo sapiens sapien, but some kind of, in the hominid family. I actually don't have a preference between one or the other. I don't know which one it is. It could have been both. I think that paleo contact was both physical and spiritual. There was Gordon White goes through all this stuff about how at some point in the distant past there was contact made with what we call the spirit realm, but that may just be a type of a version of our actual reality that we don't understand how to access yet, or we can't see. The concept of like supersymmetry of physics that basically like looks for everything to be symmetrical, like implies that there are entire other spectra of forces, or not forces, but of I guess forces like the electromagnetic spectrum. Like there are other spectra that we don't know anything about because we don't
sort of experience almost.
Yeah, well, like the electromagnetic spectrum, imagine that there's two other ones just like that are kind of like that. They're emanations of some sort, but we have no way of detecting them because we don't
have anything that can interact with them.
Right,
directly.
like we know about the electromagnetic spectrum because of our eyes. Right? Our eyes can see a piece of it, and so that gave us the clue to look for the rest of it.
Right.
But if there were other spectra that we don't have any senses to pick up, we wouldn't know about them, and we have to find out about them some other way.
It seems to me that there could be an infinite amount of spectra.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's complicated, though.
I know, but we're only like when you really think of the idea of this spectrum of frequency or whatever. Who is to say that it stops anywhere? It just.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was about to say if numbers are infinite, then the number that a frequency could jump to.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. There could be.
That's not what I mean. I mean, like, so the electromagnetic spectrum is made up of. It's a frequency, but it's made up of something. These other spectra would be made up of something else, making those frequencies. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, that's the idea. Like, I mean, the conventional. These are photons, they're photons that make up the electromagnetic spectrum. They're photons, okay? Like that's the physics idea. These other spectra would be made up of something else, not photons. They would be some other particle.
But I'd still always go back to like what these particles are. When you get down to it, is that we have detectors that are detecting motion at a certain frequency, and we name them things.
But there's other properties too, right? Besides the frequency, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, there's property like what are they composed of?
But the properties may be due to that frequency vibration. I don't know.
I see what you're saying. I think that what I'm trying to say is like imagine because the electromagnetic spectrum goes all the way like it's infinite frequency. It can go as far this way. I mean, limited by the size of the particle, I guess, if it's particles in the first place. Like you can't have a frequency on the electromagnetic spectrum that's smaller than a photon, right?
Okay.
Right. Again, thinking of it in terms of particles, which they're not really.
Right. So if you get smaller than a photon, what is that thing?
Well, I think the idea is that the electromagnetic spectrum can't get smaller than a photon, right? It stops there. Now, as large it can be as large, whatever it goes. On that end of the spectrum, it goes forever. But if you have some kind of emanation that is made up of something that is not photons, it isn't the same. I mean, I guess that's the conventional idea. And it may be shit. It may not be right at all.
Yeah, I know. I'm just the way I've always looked at it, or not always, but the way I look at it now is that you have this spectrum of frequencies, of vibration, of motion, and we like at different frequencies they interact in different ways, right? And so they have certain properties in this spectrum, so we kind of categorize that spectrum as this thing, and then we name all these things in it, but we're not really seeing things, we're just detecting motion at a frequency.
Yeah.
And so if you go to a different spectrum and you're detecting motion at a frequency there, we have different names for that and we put it in a different category. But to me, I just kind of look at it all the same, and that may not be the right way to look at it either. Okay. It's just that's just kind of the way I look at it.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't mean to jumble that up.
That's all right.
Go ahead.
All right, are we getting close on time?
Yes.
Okay,
Probably
so then,
we're
as complicated as all of your sciencing was,
go.
I just thought of a great way to explain to a Scarp Derp how their own rules tripped them up once again.
Oh, well, let's hear it.
In order for everything to follow Occam's razor, all you have to do is accept that every culture in the ancient world who told the same story about the same thing and built all this advanced craft was telling the truth, and they really did it. Or you can put them in butt flaps, make up all these crazy explanations for the metaphors that they've got, make up all kinds of other things, and take about 10 different steps to tell the same story. Which one's simpler? They all just told the truth.
Yeah. I like Ivan T. Sanders. Yeah,
That's pretty good. I like
that. That is good. I like Ivan T. Sanderson's quote. Occam had a beard.
All right. Wow. And with that, we're going to take our final break before the final segment of the final hour. Snake Bros! Snakes! Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent podcast. Final segment of the final hour from the 10x10x10 tangent cube of UFOs. Ancient tech, ancient explosions.
Doing a podcast about UFOs.
And large bowls of glass.
Two
deserts of sand in the world.
So, speaking of bowls of glass, you know that there's a bowl in the ocean?
No.
There's actually an area, I think it's in the Maldives. I don't know how you say it.
The Maldives.
Maldives, where the water's depressed. It is actually...
It needs to take some Valium or something.
Yeah, it needs antidepressants. No, it's actually... It's a bowl. Like there was a story that
what's wrong? What's interesting about that? Like why does that?
How does water should seek its own level? Like how do you have?
Oh! I gotcha. I thought you were talking about the ocean floor.
No, I'm talking about the
surface of the water. Bowl shaped. How big?
It's fairly large, and it's got kind of a slope too. Like there was a story of these I don't know what they were, but they were old. They were very old ships, and this guy had bought 5 of them or whatever they were, and he was trying to move them from where they were in this area to somewhere else, and they couldn't climb the slope.
It was that steep.
Yeah, I mean they're old, shitty, crappy ships, so it's not that steep, but it's steep enough to where these ships couldn't make it, and they had to like chain them together and tow them out with a tug. So yeah, there's this enormous bowl depression in this area of all these islands, and nobody really knows.
I mean, are we talking about 50 miles across, 1,000 miles? I mean,
like 50, 100 miles. I don't know exactly. It's around the archipelago of these islands out there off the coast of India.
Like how, like from the bottom of the bowl to the ridge, like what are we talking about? Elevation.
And I think it changes. But it's just the fact of it, however big it is one thing, but like the fact of it, period, is really the problem I'm getting at here. Like how is this happening? Like I don't know, you know.
All right,
you can't. I can tell you this. You can't fucking see it when you're on the water. You can't tell.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a slope there, but it's so slight that if you're riding on your boat or shit, you don't know that you're going downhill and then you're going uphill. Okay, but it's there. It is clearly that it is.
And there's not a like a current that's.
Oh, like a big whirlpool or something.
Yeah.
You mean? No, it's not being caused by a current. Brett's giving us some data. Yeah, that's about the Maldives, but. See if you can find anything on what I'm talking about. This bowl depression in the surface of the ocean, and I know that's out there. I don't know if there's more than one, but it kind of reminds me of these places that people refer to as like gravity anomaly areas.
Right. So unfortunately, when I looked up Maldives depression, it told me about their drug use rate. So give me just a second here, guys. I'll find it.
Clearly they're depressed out there.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. They need to just dump some antidepressants in there. But does that not seem like something that could be there's like a natural physical?
Well, they've looked for that. Like they've kind of exhausted all of the the sort of like
standard forces.
Standard, like the first things you think of, like, oh, there's a current. Is there, is there something else? Like people have thought of something is going on here that is not obvious. It's something subtle, and it's something there isn't a corresponding depression in the floor of the ocean either. So
they actually have found a source that's got several giant underwater craters, like 150 feet deep and like a half-mile wide, inside the Bermuda Triangle.
Underwater?
Yeah, like all throughout the Bermuda Triangle.
Okay.
And they also have these big methane craters in the Arctic. The Bermuda Triangle one, though, makes me think about the ejecta pattern in the Carolina Bay.
Yeah, but
so that's
what I'm talking about is a depression in the surface of the ocean water, not on the floor.
Like, whoa, like a
yes, like like the surface of the ocean is depressed into a bowl.
In a God damn it, what are they called in chemistry? I'm supposed to be the trained scientist. Like in an early month class, where the tubes for measuring that meniscus at the top, it does a little dip down so you can read accurately, like water does that.
Yeah. Yes.
Fucking weird.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. See if you can find anything on that. I know it's out there somewhere.
Well, yeah. So looking for depression is not going to get me anywhere. All right.
Yeah, man. When you're not radio silent, you can't move that phone at all. If you move it again, I'm gonna mute your ass.
It's loud.
All right. Got it.
All right. Cool. Now that we're clear on that. Anyway, so they've exhausted all and so what happened? They're just like, okay, we don't know what it is done. Or is there still research going on? Or
I'm not sure. I know that it's not explained yet, and there isn't really, as far as I have been able to find, there's not really even a hypothesis. Aside from that, there's possibly some kind of gravitic anomaly there, right?
Because if it changes and there's a bunch of islands there, it seems like the sea level, the change in this depression of the bowl would be noticeable on the, like, how much land is exposed in the islands.
Yeah, but it's static. Like, the bowl is always there.
Yeah, but you were saying, like,
what happens is, rather than the liquid having a stronger attraction or adhesion to other molecules of the liquid, it has a stronger adhesion to the outside container, so it climbs up the container slightly.
Yeah, you're talking about surface tension.
Right. But what's happening here in the Maldives is the same thing. They just really don't know why. They can't exactly explain it.
Okay, so you did find that it's there, yeah. Yeah, so, what he's saying is it looks like that surface tension thing.
Yeah, I got it.
But once you get to the outside edge of it, that's the surface of the ocean from then on. Like, it's the
thing that creates capillary action, like in when someone's dropped blood and they say. So that would lead you to believe that since it's an ionic solution in basically H2O, there's got to be glass in the container, and a lot of it.
But
glass has the adhesion in a meniscus in a test tube, and also in capillary action when it's used in medicine.
Yeah, but just because it's that same shape doesn't mean that it's a surface tension thing happening here. Like, you can use the surface tension description to describe what you're looking at, but
and it's not nearly strong enough to do that over miles.
Yeah,
like it happens.
Okay.
You'll get the bowl. Like, you don't get a bowl shape if you, like, say, fill up a pan with water. At the very edge where it's touching the edge of the pan, you will get this sloping, the slope up or down depending on, which way. Like, if you overfill a glass of water, you'll get a slope up off the edge of the glass. If you take some water out, you'll get a slope down to the water. But the middle of the water surface in the glass is flat.
Right.
It's only when you have a very small surface area that you'll actually get a full, bowl shape.
Yeah, concave shape.
Like you're talking about inside a test tube.
So I'm still having trouble finding people. Like, on the internet, they say all of this stuff about, oh my god, and all these incredible luxury hotels and all these great beaches, and nobody talks about the unique place on Earth where this happens, and it's the only place where it happens, and it's freaking crazy. Nobody wants to write about that on the internet. They just want to review hotels and restaurants.
Well, don't look up the Maldives or whatever. Maldives. Just look up this phenomena. Like, don't even put that word in there. It doesn't matter. It may not be near those islands in the first place. I was thinking that's where it was because I remember in Graham Hancock's Underworld, he's in that area when he talks about it, and he's discussing this. So I thought it was in that area, but it may not be. I just know that it exists. Anyway, the point. Yeah. The place where I was
ocean water instead.
Yeah, the place where I was going with this is like there's other places on land that are they're called like they're gravity anomalies, right?
Yeah.
Brett, are you moving the phone? Because we could still hear all that noise. Like
I can.
Yeah, sorry, I had it on speaker because I was looking at stuff on the computer. I've got it back up now.
It's fine for you to have it on speaker. Just don't move it. When you just put it down and leave it.
Gotcha.
Anyway, okay, go ahead.
Technically, from what I'm seeing here, the basic physics discussion around all of it is that the ocean itself should form a form of meniscus that's observable, measurable, probably not observable, because the attraction force isn't linear. You've got pull of all the water against itself, like in all directions. But because of the rotation, it doesn't happen, and supposedly the influence of the moon influences it also. So wherever it is that this is observable, you have to ask yourself, what is the anomalous interaction between the lunar pull of the tides, the Coriolis effect of the Earth, and the attraction of all of these particles against each other?
Right. So
should form a meniscus, but here it does, and everywhere else it doesn't.
Right, so there's something perhaps going on in that area where other forces are negated.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of makes sense, but that's just wild that it's that noticeable.
Yeah.
I mean, if a shitty boat can't get out of it.
Yeah. It's also known that like there are various places on the planet where you're generally heavier than you are somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. Gravity is stronger. And then there are places where the gravity's weird. Like it's pulling you. It seems to be pulling you like not straight down. In other words, like something that should be a flat surface looks tilted. And a lot of times people are like, those are optical illusions, right? It's an optical illusion. It looks like it's uphill, but your car will roll down it. You know. But I wonder if these things are associated. Like, if there was a strong enough gravity, or even maybe a magnetic and gravity anomaly down below the surface down there, could that end up having you have a depression in the water?
Just on the
I would think so.
On the gravity,
you could also have something as simple as if there were a like something that created different structure, like an infusion of a gas or something into the water itself, sort of forming like a quicksand-like effect in water. If it becomes less dense, it would technically dip, I think.
I think it would be the other way around.
Yeah, it would bulge. Yeah, so maybe the water's more dense.
So if it becomes denser or heavier there, it would dip.
I was just thinking, the most, I guess, the easiest way to describe gravity, or the sensation of gravity, is it's actually not discernible between the feeling of acceleration.
Yeah,
right. That's right. So it's interesting to try to get your brain to think of the force that you're feeling of gravity as acceleration in a direction.
Yeah.
So when you are going uphill, like, it could be actually a flat surface, but that the acceleration that you're feeling is in a direction that's not perpendicular to the surface that you're moving on. So
it's in the opposing vector to your direction.
Yeah. So to me, the idea that gravity, or the acceleration, trajectory is a straight line all the time is kind of silly. You know, that.
Yeah.
Why should it be a straight? Like, nowhere else in the universe is anything perfectly straight all the time. It's always everything's curved.
Yes.
So,
Welcome.
yeah, I was just like imagining, depending on where you are, like if you're standing on one side of the planet and the gravitational force or the acceleration is basically going out of the center of the planet, right? You're accelerating away from the planet, which is why you feel like you're being pushed towards the center of it. But it doesn't necessarily go straight away from the center of the planet. It can curve out.
Yeah.
So by the time this trajectory or whatever is where you are, it's not going straight away from the center. So it feels like it's pulling you maybe towards
making
some
a flat slope. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pulling you towards something that's not in the center of the planet.
Yeah.
And like, what if the whole thing? If you were to sort of visualize what we call the gravitational field of the planet, actually comes out of the center of the planet in a spiral.
Yeah.
And we're so small, and our level of experience of this acceleration is in such a small part of the overall curve that we can't really tell. But
with regards to angular momentum, the tilt and wobble of the Earth's axis would play a huge role also, because the force that's actually being exerted upon the body is constantly changing in direction when you're on a rotating surface, because your angular momentum is at the moment of inertia. So if you stop time to zero, you're heading straight forward, but you're on a rotating ball, so straight forward is never straight ahead. And then if you think of a spinning that's like tilted 13 degrees and wobbling, and now take that same vector of force if you're standing on the surface at the top, at the equator. It's changing in so many different directions.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of makes sense that there could be areas of the planet, and if one of them was covered with water, that you might notice there's something going on there, there's certain forces in that area for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That change the surface or make it even appear to be different. I don't know if it, like you were saying, you can't see it.
Right.
But the force is obviously there, and I don't know if it's measurable. I haven't really looked into it, but is it a measurable difference in elevation?
Yes. Yeah. Over the entire thing is measurable. So so with all this, I've got one more anomaly, and this is again coming from Ivan T. Sanderson's book, Pursuing the Unexplained. This was fascinating to me. I was reading it, and I was like, I've got to read this to Kyle and see what he says about this. So this is another kind of
read to me, bro.
This is another kind of geo anomaly. Like, so we've got this bowl in the ocean. We've got these weird gravity places on Earth where the slope seems to change, or uphill is downhill and whatever. I've seen some interesting videos where people pour water. They pour water onto it looks like an uphill road. They pour water on it, and the water like flows up the hill. So this is another one that Ivan C. Sanderson he encountered personally. So he says, before launching into this, I would like to say that it is quite useless for anybody to say that these anomalies did not occur, or furthermore that there cannot be an explanation. This business happened right in our own backyard, and 4 quite separate groups of people witnessed it, and at different times, and all with an adequate number of independent witnesses. Also, 3 of the principals were professional construction men and carpenters, 2 with their own businesses, another was a chemical engineer, and still another was an electronics engineer. What I mean is, we weren't just a bunch of bumpkins slapping together some bits of lumber with inadequate tools.
Bunch of rubes.
All of us were involved in a fully professional job under the supervision of 2 very experienced construction men from 2 separate companies. Moreover, we helpers did the initial and all subsequent cutting of the lumber, as to be described in a moment, under the eyes of professionals. But let me first list the persons concerned, giving their status, and then tell you why we were assembled and what we were doing. So he lists all the people. I'm not going to go through that. The reason the above persons were assembled at our headquarters was to finish up the interior construction of a new building we had put up on our society's property. This structure was actually first built in 1920 and was originally a 2-story chicken breeder, the front and upper story being of wood with a back-sloping corrugated iron roof. However, in 1928, a tornado came right across the land, clearing out 2 lines of large apple trees in the orchard and blowing the whole of this structure away, with everything in it except the back concrete wall and 2 ends. Okay, so let's see, skip forward here. He goes through the whole history. So the first odd thing noted after the passing of the tornado, and this is not confirmed until we took over 25 years later, was that the 2-foot thick concrete base that remained, and which has a 3-foot deep footing down to bedrock, was out by 8 inches at the south end of the east face. We naturally assumed that this was nothing more than an initial error in original construction, but I happened to meet the old gentleman who laid the concrete. He was a German master stonemason, and he assured me that the 2 back angles were absolutely precise right angles. And if that gentleman said so, I am afraid that I cannot but accept it. So one end of the south wall, although footed 3 feet deep and anchored to bedrock, had somehow been pulled 8 inches towards the oncoming tornado. Okay, so moving forward, let's see. He describes what it looks like. So the anomaly started coming to light when Odie Kramer, with his assistant Bill Keys, were putting up the library shelves against the back wall in the main room. Please understand that these two are true experts and have been doing just such work for many years. Bill measured up the back wall and then cut the lumber. When pieced together and laid on the brackets already installed, all of these horizontal shelves proved to be between 4 and 6 inches too long. Not wishing to waste Odie's time since he was working on some more intricate bits on the other side of the room, Bill remeasured most carefully, then trimmed the planks. This time, all the shelves were 2 inches too short. As a result, he was playing out of lumber, and it's being after the yard had closed, he was forced to appeal to Odie for instructions. Odie told me later, and he did not report all this to me until after we had hit a similar problem, that he gave Bill some pretty extensive hell. In fact, he accused him of all sorts of things, and he later told me that he even said that Bill could consider himself fired. Odie then instructed Bill to recut some of the longer planks so as to get at least 2 shelves up with some patching out. Poor Bill. The same thing happened all over again. So Odie took over, but again the same. Odie got very mad indeed and put up the 4 shelves himself, working from left to right and extending them to the right wall with bits and pieces by marking them off rather than measuring. At last, they fitted or foot or however you care to express it. And that ended Odie's worries and he finished up the job. So basically, like, he measures and he cuts them. And they're 4 inches, 6 inches too long. He measures them again, cuts them, and they're 2 inches too short. And the same thing happened 3 times in a row with another guy who was his boss.
When he finally did it after piecing them together, did he measure it?
No.
Damn it.
After about 2 weeks later, another crew moved in under the supervision of Eddie. They didn't understand yet. I can't say this guy's name. Schonenberger, to finish up a number of bits and pieces, notably on the south wall. So this is the same wall that had right angles, and yet the end had shifted. Okay, after the tornado. Here we had put up a temporary shelf over the counter and sink made of two 12-inch pine planks, but only an inch thick. We knew that this could not stand under the weight of books to be put on this 6-foot length, so we ordered 2 2-inch thick redwood planks. All we had to do was cut them to slide in between the 2 uprights, and chalk for them to lie on were already sturdily installed. Using a power saw, 2 volunteers, guided by Ernie Bassino, cut these planks to exact measurement. One came out 2 inches too long, the other 1.5 inches too short. So they put them back on the horses, remeasured both the space and then the boards, and then carefully cropped the overlinked one, and it was 2 inches too short. Since they had ruined the only 2 heavy boards we had, they appealed to Eddie, as the expert, to tell them what to do. And Eddie, too, went into a controlled rage, accusing the amateurs, in his quiet tones, of being unable to take the correct measurement, let alone learn how to use a power saw. At that juncture, I happened to wander in and so witnessed the following little charade. So he basically goes through how he wonders if they have some measuring instruments that are using Dutch inches as opposed to English ones. Okay? Yeah. But they gathered all of their measuring instruments and looked at them, and they were all the same. They weren't. There was no difference. So he says, okay, so I got to skip all that. Okay. This is more than puzzling, of course, but I did not know then of Odie Kramer's troubles, and I did not learn of them for another 2 weeks when something else happened. My assistant, Michael Friedman, was due out of the Navy, in which he had been doing his stint aboard a tin can for his appointed 4 years. We were all pressing hard to get this new building finished for his return, and so my wife, aided by the female resident members of our staff and a professional seamstress, measured up the 4 windows and a tall hanging closet for drapes, and also covers for the 2 double beds, and then went to work with the machine. As pairs of drapes came out, they took them up to the new house for hanging. First one pair, and then another came out 4 inches short. Positively infuriated, these professional and amateur seamstresses got into a terrific argument, ending, in one case, in tears of frustration. But still, it did not dawn on any of us that there might be a correlation between this business and the seemingly unmeasurable shelf planking. It ended up by having to stitch the drapes top and both sides and then take them up to the house, hang them, and trim them below in situ with all the due allowances for turnips, etc. This time they fit. 2 weeks later, Mike Friedman finally got home from the Navy. It took him a week to settle in and get it organized, but then he set to working on the electrics, planning the wiring and so forth, as he is an electrician and electronics technician. In planning the layout for the wiring to be installed by a commercial firm, he started drilling holes through beams supporting the roof. These stand upright 16 inches apart all along the building. Roof timbers are held apart by two short pieces of 2x4 called cats, and in order to drill his holes exactly where he wanted them, Mike had to knock out some of these. Then he tried to put them back. None of them fit. It was a mild fall day, and we had all the windows open. The new house is 250 feet behind the old house, where 4 of us were working, but we heard Mike's expletives loud and clear, so I went to investigate. He told me what was happening, and I must say that I felt a sort of chill creeping over me. But playing it innocent, I asked Mike to show me what on earth he was talking about. He did, standing on a stepladder and using both the old cats and some new pieces of lumber. None of them fit, so I got a pencil and marked the ladder off, cut them myself, and had Mike bang them in. Mike is a very pragmatic chap, and he was not happy. I said nothing immediately, as I was just as unhappy myself, but it was then that I got on the phone to Otis and asked him if he had had any trouble with the linear measurements while on the job. Only then did I learn that he had, and just what he had encountered, as described earlier, and that he was not just puzzled but somewhat distressed by it. When he had heard me out, his first remark was to the effect that he had not wanted to bother me with this, as he thought I would think him either balmy or totally incompetent. When I recounted what else had happened and the number of outside witnesses to each incident, he gave an audible sigh of relief. He also came up and took a look around. So he goes on from there, but that's basically the gist of it. Like, whenever they measured, it was either too short or too long. They had to actually physically put it up there and make a mark without taking any kind of freaking metrology measurement and cut it, and then and they could put it in there and make it fit. But for some reason, if you went up there with a tape measure and then you brought your tape measure over to the board and you cut from that, it didn't fucking work every time.
That's wild.
That is weird shit.
The space is not the same everywhere.
And it seems to start, he's kind of...
It seems like the board should have gotten shorter when you brought it up there to fit. But it didn't.
Yeah.
It's like the change was some weird ratio that kept changing.
Right. Like the guy pulls the freaking the 2x4 cats out of the ceiling and drills some holes behind them, and then he goes to put them back in, never having not changed anything, and they don't fit.
Because they moved them into a different size space.
Right.
They got longer. Right. And then they didn't shrink when he brought them back.
Right. And he seems to imply that this has it's like the beginning thing.
That's what I'm going to tell my boss next time.
Clearly there's a space-time anomaly here. He seems to imply that it has something to do with this wall that moved 8 inches and yet retained its 90 degree angles.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, I find that kind of stuff fascinating. That like there's places on Earth where things don't work right. And, shit isn't the same.
That's why you need Cyclopean architecture.
That's right.
They can't change.
There's no 90 degree angles, and you just put those in and you shave them off until they fit right.
Yeah.
All right. That is it for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed all the anomalies in the science and the bowls and water and glass bowls in the desert.
Technical difficulties and all that.
Yeah. And just remember, don't use a measuring tape. Just fucking stick it up there and cut it.
Yeah.
It's the best way to do it.
Measure once, cut twice.
That's right. Ask questions later. All right, you guys can look us up on the blog at brothersoftheserpent.blogspot.com. You can comment there. You can give us suggestions. You can tell us we're awesome. You can tell us we suck. You can send us an email. brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. And tell us we're awesome. Tell us we suck. You can go onto iTunes and give us 5-star reviews. Tell everybody we're badass. Keep us from that. You can do this also on Stitcher or on Tuned In. Really, if you guys would do that, that would be awesome. It really helps spread the show. Gives people that don't know us at all, they look at it and they're like, well, I'll try this out because this guy's a favorite badass.
Yeah.
So that's it for this week.
Thanks a lot.
We'll see you guys next week on the next episode of Brothers of the Serpent podcast. UFOs. Good night, Adamu. Get some UFOs. Ouch. Did you just hit that mic?
Yeah.